Hi, I'm Lance Cottrell, Chief Scientist at Ntrepid, and today I want to talk about misattribution challenges. Why is it so hard to maintain a false identity online, and how does it go wrong? Now, this is part 4 of a 4-part series. If you haven't watched the earlier parts, I recommend you at least go back and listen to part 1, the general overview, before diving into this episode. Online misattribution is hard, fundamentally, because there's only one way to do it right, and there's thousands of ways to do it wrong. There's so many different kinds of mistakes and different aspects to maintaining a good identity online, and if you make a mistake in any of them, it can unwind the entire effort. Probably the most common source of mistakes is simple operational security errors, or OPSEC failures, where people forget to use their tools appropriately or provide the wrong information. So not turning on a VPN to hide your IP address, the most basic level of misattribution, is probably also one of the most common mistakes. And even if you're doing 1,000 activities and you turn it on 999 times, that one time you forget to turn on the VPN is all it takes for your real IP address to get logged and your opponents to be able to get in there, discover who and where you are, and unwind your entire activity. But this also applies to things like reusing account names or reusing passwords, crossing the streams between different personas. There's lots of these subtle mistakes that it's easy to make. Signing the wrong name on an email, or thinking that you were already introduced to someone that you don't actually yet know as that identity. Any of these kind of simple operational mistakes can immediately lead to exposing your activity. And keeping track of all that requires a very consistent approach and a very regimented record-keeping process. Now, the level of sophistication of your opponents makes a huge difference as well. Right? If you're only going up against some random thug, it's unlikely that they're going to have the tools or know-how to really be able to dig in and significantly uncover a well put together misattribution activity. But if you're going up against nation-state actors, then everything's different, right? They have the ability to monitor huge chunks of the internet. They have the ability to get in and either subpoena or hack logs and records of different servers. They can look at financial transactions, and they will put together all of those data points and look for any slip-up. And they've got the time and persistence to dig in and find those little grains of sand where you might have left something out. So understanding who you're going up against is really the first step to understanding how deep down the misattribution rabbit hole do you need to go? How many kinds of attacks might they be able to launch against your identity that you then need to make sure that you're backstopping and mitigating? Another problem which we've started to see recently is account closures. Because there's been so much activity over the last couple of years with people doing influence operations and using social media to try to create huge hordes of fake accounts, these social media companies are now taking it seriously and are making a serious effort to try to identify and remove these fake accounts from their platforms. Well, unfortunately, when you're conducting misattribution, you are another one of those fake accounts. And so making sure that they don't detect you as a fake account and remove you along with all of the other spammers and hackers is a big problem. And so that means not only do you need to not be behaving in an inappropriate way on the platform, but you also need to be active across the entire internet, because these social media platforms have visibility across a very large fraction of major websites through their like buttons, the social sharing buttons, the advertising networks. They have a visibility that's hard to imagine. And they can see, oh, are you only active on this one platform? Or are you a real person who goes and looks at sports and reads news and shops at online retailers and does all the things that normal people do? Because if you don't, then you stand out as not looking like a real person, and the odds of your account getting deleted goes way up. It's important to think about what information about your persona may be visible to your vendors. What can your ISP see? What can your hosting provider see? What can the social media operator see? because that information may get out. They might be hacked. They might have a major breach. Someone uploads all that information. There could be insider attacks, right? They may have been infiltrated by your opponents who are able to get at that information. There may be legal process, depending on where they're located and where your data is. Your opponents may be able to lean on those vendors to get at the information that they need to understand who you really are. And of course, there are then non-legal approaches, including things like rubber hose cryptanalysis, right? If there's someone who knows the truth about your persona and your opponent can get them in a dark room and beat the truth out of them, then they've got you. Now, of course, that's a pretty extreme scenario. It may only apply if the kind of activity you're engaging in is at that level of importance to your opponents. But in many cases, it is. Finally, social engineering can be a very effective way for your opponents to undo the work you're doing. They may social engineer your providers, your vendors, your platform operators. They can social engineer your social circle to see, is this person really a friend of yours? Are you really someone that they know personally, or did you just convince them to connect to you across this social media? Or in fact, they might even be able to social engineer you, get you to reveal too much information and paint yourself into a corner, maybe admit to something that suggests that you're not actually who you're supposed to be. There's a lot of ways to get you to say or do things which might not make sense for your persona to do, but do for you. And unless you're able to maintain that hyper level of vigilance, you can slip up. So let's look at just a couple of examples of this. One was, some years back, a website called the Silk Road. This was a dark web cyber souk for drug and other kind of criminal activities, buying and selling. And the operator of this site went by the name Dread Pirate Roberts. And his real name, as we now know, was Ross Ulbricht. And we know it because he made simple mistakes in his OPSEC. In particular, there were correlations between his accounts, especially early on. He would use the same account name for activities that were related to his real identity and to his Dread Pirate Roberts activity on the Silk Road. And the problem here is you can never slip up. So he had to be absolutely careful and consistent when he first started, before he knew the Silk Road was going to be a big thing, before he knew that it was going to be that important to be hiding his identity, that his liberty depended on him hiding his identity. But he didn't know that, and so he wasn't that careful. And so he made simple mistakes that then, when the FBI took the time to really study all of his activity, they were able to go back and link the Dread Pirate Roberts persona, that identity, to the real name Ross Ulbricht, and arrest him. Another example is a hacker, one of the founders of the LulzSec collective of hackers, a guy named Sabu, or Hector. And we know it's Hector because Sabu, again, was very consistent in using VPNs, because he was a hacker and he knew he was committing criminal activity. He knew it was critical to hide his real identity. But just once, he forgot to turn on the VPN and exposed the IP address of his real apartment in the United States. And a quick subpoena to his cable modem provider immediately exposed his real name, his real address, all of his identity information. And so the police were able to come in and get him. He probably used that VPN literally thousands of times without error. But just once, one slip, one late night, one moment of inattention, and he was burned. And so this points out that when you're thinking about building these tool sets and building the infrastructure to support misattribution, it's critical that these things fail safe. You should not be using tools that you can accidentally forget to turn on. Ideally, you want your investigation environment configured in a way that until you turn on that VPN, nothing happens. It is not possible to go out on the web without the protection in place. I think right now my favorite example of misattribution failure is the Russian hackers who broke into the Democratic National Committee, because they made all the mistakes. It was pretty clear, in fact, in retrospect, that this was not Russia's A team. This was their less experienced group that was also doing other kinds of hacking and influence, while the best people were going against harder targets, because the DNC is not that hard to break into, obviously. But because they were not that experienced, they made basically all the mistakes you can make. And when Mueller went to investigate this and the FBI put together their reports, it's amazing the amount of information they were able to get. So these Russian hackers forgot to turn on their VPN on more than one occasion. They used the same accounts to buy infrastructure. So an account would be used to buy a server used for one of their identities that was supposed to be a hacktivist organization, and they used it to buy another server which was supposed to be a Romanian hacker with no connections to the hacktivists. But both of them were paid for by the same entity, using similar email accounts. And then they also made mistakes with financial misattribution. So in particular, Bitcoin. All of the Bitcoins they had came out of the same couple of accounts and flowed out to all of these different entities doing all kinds of different unrelated things, and which were putatively not connected to each other. Right? These are identities that were supposed to not have any knowledge of each other, but yet they got all of their Bitcoin currency from the same sources. And so very quickly, by looking through all of the logs and looking through the blockchain records, you could tell how that flow had gone and immediately know that these were in fact related entities. And in fact, they were able to show exactly which accounts were created, when, how the money flowed, which things bought which servers that were then used by which other identities to conduct which activities. All of that was able to be tracked and understood and attributed back to the Russian GRU with high degree of certainty. So at the end of the day, to stay misattributed on the internet, particularly against a sophisticated opponent, requires almost perfection. Everything you need to do, all of the technical protection, hiding your IP address, hiding your browser fingerprint, hiding your system identifiers, hiding your IP address, making sure those are all consistent with who you're supposed to be, and all the soft issues, your account names, your profile photos, your history, your writing style, your patterns of activity, your banking, your finances. Every single one of those needs to be done perfectly to avoid being exposed. And that's really the trick. Getting any one of those right, not that difficult. Getting them all right all the time, that's what separates the experts from the beginners. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Ntrepid Cast. If you haven't already seen them, I encourage you to go back and check out parts 1 through 3 of this series on misattribution. And please like and subscribe to get alerted to all the other videos that we put out on misattribution and online operations. Till next time, ciao.